Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Evolve with Emily show. I'm your host, Emily Hayden. Thank you guys so much for spending your time with me. I know that your time is incredibly valuable, and I really appreciate that. And I promise that it is my promise to you, I'll always do my best to bring you the most amount of value in each of these podcasts. Now, for today's episode, I have on with me therapist, coach, trauma survivor, and six-figure conscious entrepreneur, intuitive empath, healer, and host of the Conscious Leadership podcast, Gabby Ortega. Gabby, welcome to the show.
Hey, Emily, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So let's tell them how we know each other.
Yeah, so your brother actually is my personal trainer, and he has like totally changed my life. And every day that we have a session, he's like, "You have to meet my sister. You guys are like the same person, and you would really hit it off." So we got avocado toast yesterday, and the rest is history.
Oh shit! This is a good start. We are clearly aligned.
Yes. Oh my god,
that's amazing.
But needless to say, like we dove into like deep conversation immediately. So I think this is a really good time to record a conversation now.
Yeah, I think so too. So, and on my end, Sam would always pick me up for our gym session. After your gym session, he'd be like, my client Gabby, you really got to meet her. She's just amazing. She's just like us. He's like, she's real. She's down to earth. She also has a little gangster vibe to her, like from Jersey. I was like, I can get down with that.
Oh my God. I actually feel really touched by that. That is some cred that I did not know I was going to get.
Especially from Sam.
I know. He's so legit. I love him.
He's so legit. It's true. Sam, we love you. Shout out to Sam. Okay, so I let my audience know that I'd be interviewing you, and a lot of them checked out your page. They saw that you're into therapy. It says trauma survivor in your bio. There's a lot that you talk about that are really heavy topics, but you present it in such a digestible format. And so we got a ton of questions. But before we dive into a lot of those things, I kind of want to get a little bit of insight into you and your background, who you are, maybe some of the experiences that you had, and what led you to pursue this path of therapy and coaching and personal development in the first place.
Yeah. So I think like most people who dive into their own development journey, it usually starts because there's stuff happening that you don't really love. Mm-hmm. For me, I, went through kind of a childhood where there was some trauma, lived with a family member who had mental illness, and that really affected me in a certain way, and was bullied really, really horribly for pretty much my entire childhood. And then in college experienced sexual assault. So, by the time I hit my mid-20s, I was so down. I think I was so lost that I really had to take a step back and go, okay, what's going on? Because I remember being really happy at a certain point. I remember feeling like when I was younger, I knew who I was. And then at some point stuff happened and I lost my way. And I was at a certain point, I think, in my mid-20s where I was like 25, 26, I had graduated college. I had a degree that I hated. I was like, what am I going to do with this? So much guilt.
A lot of people can relate to that.
Oh my God. Yeah, because when I was that young, when I was 18, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
I hate that they make us try to figure that out at 18. We don't even really know fully who we are.
No, absolutely not. And the thing is that, like, what I've learned is that we're still like babies at that age, developmentally. So, we think we're so old and we know everything, and really we're just getting started.
I remember being in college, and even being like a college senior, I thought I was like so, just cool, and maybe not cool, but like I thought I was so old. I thought I was so adult. And now I look at college kids and I'm like, children. Those are children.
Oh my God, I had the same
Where's
thing.
your ID? Show me your ID.
Yes. And it's like hard to believe looking at, a younger generation now, like that we look like that we were
totally.
that young, it's so funny. Hindsight's 2020. But yeah, so I had graduated. I was waiting tables for like 5 years, making minimum wage, like really just depressed and lost, and drinking a lot, like to cope with this kind of existential crisis that I think I call the like mid-20s, like quarter life crisis kind of a situation. Because I'm like, what am I going to do like for the rest of like, I don't know, like the 70 odd years I have like on this planet? I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I was really struggling with alcoholism. And that was something that, I'm only more recently talking about, because it's so sensitive and so personal. But it was really a manifestation of my trauma. And I got so depressed that I kind of reached a point where I was pretty like having suicidal thoughts. And I was like, okay, it would be easier if I didn't wake up in the morning. And it started to scare me.
Wow.
And I've been depressed before. I've had anxiety my entire life, like crippling anxiety. And I dealt with it. But I think I hit like a breaking point that I was like, okay, I'm either going to fix this and figure this out because I deserve that, or I'm going to just give up and check out. And my cousin actually had committed suicide. And I'd rather say like she took her life, like, because I think the word committed, even the language has like some stuff going on there and heaviness. But she had taken her own life and she had her own mental health struggles. And ever since that had happened, when she was like in her late 20s and I was in my like early 20s, I had said to myself, like, you know what, I promise no matter how bad it gets, I'm never going to do that. And so I reached a point where I was like, okay, I'm either going to kill myself with alcohol and like this and just like being lost, or I'm going to figure this shit out. And so like I kind of buckled down and I went back to therapy, and I'd been in and out my entire life, but never really found like a clinician who I connected with. And that was a huge problem. So it never I got like a lot of self-awareness, but I never really got the forward movement that I needed. So I decided to go back to school and teach myself how to heal myself, because I was like, you know what, I can't rely on anybody else. It looks like I need a lot of different things. Like, let me just figure this out for myself. So at that point, I was like 26. I went into my master's degree for clinical psychology, and I double specialized in trauma and childhood development, and it cracked everything wide open.
Wow.
And I suddenly realized, I was like, holy shit, everybody has childhood stuff.
Yeah.
And this idea of trauma, we're just now understanding it's so much more nuanced and complex than the way that we have been presented in the past. And that most of us actually have trauma. 99.9% of us, if you've ever had an upsetting experience, if it's not integrated, it becomes trauma.
Yeah, I think some people hear the word trauma and they think that it's only these insane traumatic events, in the sense of like, you know, an emergency room visit, a death, something crazy like movie-like that you see, and they don't understand that trauma can be something that might just seem like a regular day thing, you know, like, for example, maybe your parents were always like disconnected from you, or they were always working, and when they got home, they didn't show you attention, and you don't realize that there's trauma associated to that. So people think like, there's a question, you know, if I don't have trauma, like, do I really need to go to therapy or to work on anything? And I think some people may not even be aware to just some of the stuff they have. And it's not to like label everyone with like, oh, there's something so wrong with you. It's not that at all.
No.
Yeah, but it's like we all just have certain life experiences that we should work through. So I think it's incredible that you were able to, one, attend therapy for yourself, but realize that you needed something else and you needed something more. And then also just to explore that for yourself. I think that's amazing. So take us through that journey of when you were in school and learning about these things. Were you also going to therapy at that time?
Yeah, I was. Actually, a really awesome classmate was like, hey, I have a therapist I think you're really going to like. And I was like, like, I've seen like 5. Like, and I also am very like self-studied. So there were a lot of therapists and psychologists I would see who I knew more than them. And so I kind of was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. So I went in, and I don't want to like, you know, blow her up, but her name was Magnolia, and she was awesome. She was a few years older than me. She was the first therapist that I really connected with. She was young. She knew what was up. She like was very real with me. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. Yeah. And it was the first time I had learned concepts like boundaries. I was 26 and I'd never heard of what a boundary like was, or like, and I realized, oh my God, like so much of my trauma is like attachment related, and I have to really work on that. But again, talking about trauma, talking about therapy, it's like, it's very individual, and you have to be in a place where you want to look at this stuff. We all have stuff to look at, but if you're, you know, fairly resilient and you have a very, very happy life, and you don't need to open those boxes, that's okay. Like if you've experienced trauma and then you're totally functional and everything is great and you're feeling fine and you're not self-sabotaging or doing things to annihilate your life, then just keep living. Like there's no reason to dive into that.
I love this. This is such a good point.
Absolutely. So resilience factors are huge. And that's something I wanted to talk about as well, is that like, you know, if you grow up in like a pretty like supportive environment and your needs are met emotionally and physically and all of those things, and you have like a support system, when something really bad happens to you, statistically, you're far more likely to be able to kind of really get through it because your resilience factor is high. But let's say you grow up in a really chaotic environment and you don't have support systems, and, you know, maybe, and this is really, you know, especially relevant for those with lower socioeconomic statuses where parents are working 2 or 3 jobs and you don't have like necessarily everybody there all the time to help you, that lowers your resilience factor. And there's a kind of questionnaire called the Adverse Childhood Experience Questionnaire. And it shows that like those resilience factors determine how the trauma will affect us.
Wow.
So yeah, so if you don't have them, you will see more self-sabotaging later on. You will see things
Interesting.
coming up. So again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's
I love that. Yeah, oh my gosh, it's such a good point because I feel like, therapy and personal development, I'm so glad that it's getting highlighted right now and that people are looking more into that than they ever have before. But like you said, like if you were doing well in life and you're happy and you're on a good, page, on a good journey, don't mess it up.
No, but it's because it's also very heavy, and like you
Yeah.
don't know by cracking things open whether or not it's going to. I mean, I always say more self-awareness is really good. You're more in control, but you can really go work deep into shadow work that maybe you're not totally in a place to be ready for, and you'll know if you're ready to do that kind of work because things will present themselves, and you'll be like, I have to look at some stuff, and you'll know.
So question, you talked a little bit about sobriety and living a sober life now. So I know that alcohol was a big issue for you, but what was kind of the deciding factor of because some people would say, oh, let me just limit it or let me not do it that often. What made you say like, no, that's not going to be a part of my life anymore, like completely sober?
Yeah, it was a long process. It was first kind of realizing that looking at the DSM for, substance abuse disorder, I met all of the criteria. So that was really hard to ignore during school.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, well, okay, that's like pretty spelled out. I also had an idea because when I would drink, I would have a really hard time stopping.
Oh, okay.
And early on, like in college, they're like, binge drink as much
yeah,
as you can.
I feel like it's so normalized.
Yeah, it's normalized.
Yeah, so how do you recognize like, this is actually a problem for me?
When you start to have memory loss, when you actually have a hangover, that's technically abuse of substances.
Wow.
So if you actually are having regular hangovers, you are abusing substances.
Wow. That I feel like we need to just say that again. Just because there's so many college kids, even now I'm sure that are listening, and not even just college, like anyone in general, like they don't realize what's okay and what's actually categorized as abuse. So if you are getting a hangover, that is categorized as abusing that substance.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, and it was really surprising to me because I'm like, this is like literally, I grew up with like Jersey Shore, and I'm from New Jersey, and I was like, yes, this is how we do it. We go hard.
Where's the beach?
Yeah, and I went to USC, which is like a major party school, and I would double down drinking. The guys would be like, what the,
Girl, me too. I partied hard. We were at Texas A&M University. We did the ring dunk thing. I played like 13 games of beer pong and won before I dunked my yeah, it was a thing.
It was a thing, but I think when you're young and like, it's like that's also kind of part of the culture.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you're then in your mid-20s and you're drinking like 3 bottles of wine at night and hiding it in your closet and then like screaming at your partner. I love you, Devin. I'm so glad we're engaged.
Okay. Yes, congratulations on the recent engagement.
Thank you.
And yes, let's hand clap for all the partners that stick by the sides through the ups and the downs.
The healing process.
Yeah, sometimes that healing process is messy.
It's super messy. So I think ask yourself, I think the main kind of way to decide whether or not it's a problem is it causing dysfunction in your life? Are you missing out on social events because you're going to drink too much and then scream or break something or something bad is going to happen, cause a scene? Are you missing out on your work because you're hungover or, different appointments or things that you are obligated to go show up for? Do you pregame before you go out and then drink more when you're out, like way more than other people? I mean, and this is a very personal thing. Like Devin had no idea the amount I was drinking. When I finally told him, he was like, what?
Wow.
Like I could put down like a couple of like I don't know, I think they were like 3 shots in a little bottle, like a couple of those like a day.
Wow.
And he would have vodka and like he wouldn't know. And I would just be like kind of fine. But the way that it's being used was for self-medication. And I want to make that super clear. It's like, it's not to shame anyone who's struggling because like I struggled for like 10 years before I figured out like how to get help and how to get to that place. But it's understanding like it's a form of medication, but it's also a form of self-harm at a certain point. And just ask yourself, is it serving where you're trying to go?
What helped you when you finally decided like, okay, I need to be sober. I need to not be drinking. What helped you to do that? Because it's kind of hard, especially when you're used to that. Or when it's like in social settings, how do you say no to friends? Like how did you handle all of that? And what was your support through that?
It was really hard. I kind of did it hand in hand as I was working through the tail end of my kind of trauma healing. And part of the healing process is that and I explain this to like all of my clients because everybody goes through this, whether they're doing business and leadership coaching or they're doing mental health coaching, there's a shedding that happens when you start to evolve and grow into your highest self. You shed the people around you and the situations and environments that like no longer serve you. So by the time I was getting sober, I had already really cocooned myself, and it was pretty much like my safe circle of my mom, my mom's partner, Devin's family, and that was it. And like I kind of had like one or two close friends outside of that, but I kind of just like really had to get rid of the people in my life who were not going where I was going, and it was really painful. And it wasn't anything that was a big confrontation. I think this is the other thing people think. It's going to be like, oh my God, you've changed and I can't stand you anymore and blah, blah, blah. Really what it is you just stop getting invited to things.
Totally.
Like it's so much lamer than you think it is. And I just stopped getting invited to stuff. And it hurt, but it also was like, I get it. I hold a mirror up to where they are on their healing journey. And it brings feelings of discomfort and shame maybe, or whatever else is coming up internally for them when I show up and I say, oh, no, thank you, I'm not drinking, when we used to binge drink together.
Right.
And they still are doing these behaviors and I'm like, nah, I'm healing. And then they got really uncomfortable and and that's like normal and totally fine. Many of them have come back and they're on their own journeys now and they're like, I get it.
That's cool. Oh, so it came full circle.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. So I would say honor yourself first. Know that you're probably going to have a shedding of some kind. And that's going to be a little painful, but in the end, it's less painful than going through the cycle of abuse, and the cycle of like that guilt, that shame, that feeling like you have to really hide yourself. And it's just not worth it. That was so much more torturous than just like finally putting down the alcohol. But it took years. I went in and out of AA for almost 3-4 years before I actually like walked in and said, okay, I need a sponsor. Like I can't do this by myself.
Yeah. Okay. And do you feel like having that sponsor, that mentor was really helpful?
Huge. It normalized it. I got to hang out with all these young people my age who were all in recovery, who were all dealing with trauma and different things happening. And it really opened my eyes. I was like, holy shit, this is the hardest work in the world to come back from this. And these are the most, I think, amazing human beings in the planet who are like in recovery because it is the hardest motherfucking thing to do. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that.
Of course. Yes. Be your full self.
But I
agree. Yeah. And it's funny. I don't think I've ever talked about this on the show, but years and years ago, I actually dated a guy that was in AA. And after we broke up, I continued to go because I would go with him sometimes like as a guest or whatever. And then I just continued to go in my own city because I loved those people so much. And honestly, I felt more connected to God than I had ever felt because I was like in there doing the work.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And you're with other people that are being vulnerable and they're connecting and they're committing themselves to a higher power and to be of service of other people. And they're just people that are doing things with their actions that are really making a difference in the world. And I loved it. I love AA.
Yes, I love AA. Guys, if you like have grown up, with a family where alcoholism runs, in the family and you aren't maybe suffering from alcoholism, check out Al-Anon, Codependence Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. Like whatever you're struggling with, these groups, these support groups, community is so healing.
It is. And I think there's something so different about this versus, for example, a religious type of thing, right? Because I think a lot of people try to find that community in religion or churches or things like that. And I myself have tried to do that as well. And sometimes it's just so hard. And one thing that I loved about the anonymous group that I went to, and that a lot of people go to, is when they go, they just like take their heart out and like flip it down on the table. They're like, here it is. This is all the stuff. Yeah. This is what I'm doing. And they're open. They're honest. They're real. Like they don't hold back. They don't put up a front. Like they're just the realest people out there. And I love real. It's so it's like you can breathe deeper around people that are being real and honestly and authentically themselves versus trying to feel like they have to put up a front to, make everything look good and dandy. My family, we've never been the family that like makes everything seem fine and dandy. Like we hash it out. Yeah. When we think something, we say it and then we work through that and we get through on the other side. And so that's what I look for when I look for a community and people to surround myself with too. Like I would much rather you have something in your mind about me and be like, hey, can I share something that I'm thinking? This is just on my mind, And even if it's like some form of like helpful criticism, I'm like, yeah, tell me, let's go. You know,
I'm the same way. I'm like, please, like, I do not want to struggle trying to read your mind. Please do not make me. I can't do it.
Exactly. And like, I try to think the best about everything. So if you don't tell me, I'm going to assume we're okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Me too. So you'll tell me if we're not okay, right?
100%.
Okay. Like text me.
Like instantly. I'll probably voice memo.
Me too.
Because I don't like to leave anything up for interpretation. I like you to hear me say it in my voice.
Yeah.
I've been told us Haydens can be a little intense sometimes. I don't know if you've noticed that from Sam.
No, he's just like intensely adorable and focused and like supportive. I guess that's the intensity.
Okay, yeah. You've only seen one aspect.
He told me but he did show me where he stood up for his friend one time and physically.
Did
and
he
that
show
was
you that
the video? Yeah.
I knew it was a video.
It was a video, and I was like, oh.
You're like, oh, that's inside of there too. Okay.
I know, but I'm really glad that that he likes me, because that means that if anything ever bad happened to me, he would totally be there. And I'm like, damn, that's good to know.
Exactly. You need to know those kinds of people that are on your team in your family. That's how my family, that's how we are. We're protectors at heart, and we're very, very loyal, like super loyal. So we will protect the people around us, the people that we love, even if it doesn't even have to be like that good of a friend. We're just the people that, like, that's where we grew up. Like your neighborhood, the people around you, like it's always like, we got you kind of thing. Okay, so I want to get a little bit back on track. So we got a ton of questions. I want to dive into some of them. One of the top questions was how do you start to recognize your triggers, and how do you work through triggers?
Yeah,
that's a very broad topic, but just
there's definitely basic things. So the first thing I share with people is start to become the observer of your lived experience. Now, what is this? Like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, break that down. Thanks.
So I think like back in 2017, I told you over brunch the other day, I spent about a month or like 3 weeks down in the south of France learning meditation, living at this Buddhist monastery, like a fucking hippie.
So cool. It's so cool.
For part of my master's program to study the integration of depth psychology and Buddhist philosophy. And I was like, whoa, this is super interesting. So part of the training is meditation and understanding how to start becoming the observer of your thoughts and feelings and separating your soul from and your consciousness from the kind of biological being of your animal body and your animal brain. And so what that means is, if you're trying to figure out what are my triggers, if anything, like if you're in a situation where something is deeply upsetting, where you are finding your body is being very activated, if you have anxiety, this might look like shaking. It might look like breathing from your upper chest and feeling like really short of breath. It might feel like you're having a panic attack. That's like a signal from your body that something is happening. And we have been, especially as a Western society, so disconnected from our bodies, and we're told, you know what, everything lives in our conscious mind and everything is in our brain. But the truth is, our bodies actually have hundreds of millions of receptors that pick up on energy and information way faster, like below the level of awareness, to give us information about whether we're safe or not.
That's great. That's so cool to think about.
Yeah, our bodies are biological organisms. Like, just because we have like frontal lobes that developed in the last like 100 years or whatever doesn't make us like masters of our own like primal brain and things that are part of our unconscious that helped us survive and evolve as a species. So your body, like learning how to read your body, the same way you would like learn how to read your dog. Like if you can't really tell what's going on. Is he hungry? Is he in pain? It's kind of like, ask yourself the same questions. Like, what does it feel like in my body to feel anxious, or to feel in fear, or to feel anger? Anger is a response to threat. Anger is not necessarily just like it comes out of nowhere. Anger is actually like a direct survival response in fight or flight. It's fight.
Oh, wow.
So it's activated when we feel a sense of threat. So if you find yourself getting into a lot of fist fights,
right?
If you find yourself like, abusing substances and then going kind of crazy, there's a trauma response that's happening that's reenacting itself, because once we get stuck in a trauma loop, we repeat it until we resolve it.
Wow.
So if you like I had a kind of, abusive relationship in high school. And like that really was a repeat of kind of my relationship I had with my father, who's really struggled with mental illness. By means of that, there was a lot of emotional abuse that happened. I then repeated that with the boyfriends over and over and over again. And what that was my unconscious really trying to close the loop on that original attachment trauma that I had with my father. And the unconscious mind is always trying to heal. Our bodies are intuitively always trying to heal themselves. It's why when we get a scratch on our finger, we can not put a Band-Aid on it or anything and it'll heal.
Wow. So our minds and our brains are trying to do the same thing.
100%.
Even without us knowing or consciously doing it.
Yeah. So if you find yourself getting activated by situations, that's the first sign like that there is a trigger happening. And this is something to really get curious about with a lot of openness and compassion and non-judgment and just like look at yourself like a child and be like, what is my inner child saying to me? What do I need right now?
Wow. Okay. And so you talked about how you were basically repeating that pattern from your relationship with your father, then into your relationships. How did you, because obviously you were choosing a certain type of relationship and a pattern. So how did you then break that pattern and choose something different?
I didn't.
Oh, okay.
No, I 100% did not.
Okay.
My current fiance actually comes from his own background, when I won't go into it, because of his privacy, but his own background of trauma that he wasn't really aware of. And so we activated each other, but we fell so deeply in love that we were like, we realized we were self-sabotaging our own relationship. And we were like, okay, we got to fucking fix this like immediately. So we both went to therapy. And that's kind of around the time that I started, going back to school. And then I would come home and be like, Devin, did you know about attachment theory? And I'm like, this is you and your mom. This is like you and your dad. And this is like why you feel this way. And he's like, oh, and so we both went on this healing journey together. And our relationship is like, I hope everybody can experience this because we're so fully able to be ourselves. We recognize and take responsibility for our own triggers because the triggers may not go away. They get less and less with doing different therapies and, interventions and practices. But it's recognizing the other day, he was going to heat up my leftovers and I immediately went to go be like, those are mine. But really they were his. And I have I'm an only child. And I know for me, sharing is really hard. And I have to be like, I'm feeling really mad right now because you're eating what I think is mine, but I know it's not mine. And I'm just going to feel this and I'm going to go to the other room and I'll be right back. And I that's the kind of conversations we have now.
That's amazing. That's such a difference between somebody that is doing the work and then somebody who maybe isn't, who would just freak out and not really explain or even know why.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why, I found for myself, it's so important. I feel like you have to find somebody that is kind of on the same level as you as far as doing the work. Because once you become aware to all these things, you can't become unaware to it.
You can't close that box.
Yeah. And then you'll just feel alone in your thoughts and in your awareness if the other person's not matching your awareness. Because then it's almost like you have compassion for them because you're like, oh, you don't see it all. What you're...
nothing.
Yeah.
Because it's hard because when we start these healing journeys, whether it's, family, friends, people we were dating, or seeing or whatever, we want to bring them with us. And many times as part of the shedding, we can't. And I really apologize in advance. If you work with me for business and leadership coaching, you may break up with your partner.
Oh my gosh.
And it's happened multiple times. Oh. Not a trend, but that people who are kind of in this evolution were you know what, I'm realizing this isn't for me anymore. And the other person knew it too. It wasn't like I was breaking people up, but there's this level of self-awareness that once you open the box and you're like, oh, I know what I really want now. It's so hard and so painful to then deny yourself that reality.
It's so true. And I think, especially if you are with a partner and you start to go down this self-development road or you start investing in therapy for yourself, I think it's a great idea to both do it, to encourage the other person, hey, I'm going on this journey and I would love for you to come with me, and encourage them to go on, their journey as well. But then you have to just recognize and respect the fact that everybody has freedom of choice and not everybody's going to choose.
And the timing is magic. It happens when it's meant to happen. People dive into this work when they're meant to. And I think what really inspires people is not telling people to go on a journey. What I've seen is you go on a journey and you get happy and other people are like, what the fuck is she on?
Yeah.
I want that.
Exactly.
What?
Yes.
And that actually has inspired my mom to go on her own healing journey. Multiple people in my life to be like, you know what, I like want to feel the way you feel. Like, what did you do? And I'm like, therapy and coaching.
Yeah.
You know?
I love it. You're like, let me show you the ways.
Let me show you, because
welcome to the dark
it's
side,
fantastic.
which is actually the best side.
It is the best side. The self-aware side, when you can get in the dark side and like get through it and then like integrate, it's like magic.
Yeah, because there's so much power in being able to understand what's going on and having the self-awareness to have self-responsibility for the things that you do, the things that you interact with, what you allow to make you upset or not make you upset, you know, because before it's kind of like, you know, I always use this analogy that you're like this pinball being bounced around from thing to thing and emotion to emotion. But like when you actually get into the driver's seat, then you can sit there and say, no, I'm actually going to stop at this stop sign, you know, or you know what, I'm not going to go right. I'm going to go left this time. And you get to be in control of, you know, what you allow come into your thoughts, feelings, mindset, all of the above.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is like understanding like your programming, your trauma, your background, that insight. Like you can see your thoughts popping up, where they're coming from, because your thoughts don't belong to you half the time, 95% of the time, actually.
Totally. And that's been something that's been crucial for me is just recognizing when I have certain thoughts and then being an observer of it, like you talked about earlier. This actually happened literally yesterday. I was driving in LA traffic.
The worst. I get so aggressive.
Okay. I can be the most calm, centered, meditative person, feeling great, did my morning routine, you know, on my stuff. I can let like one or two things slide, but if I'm on a 45-minute journey in LA, there's at one point I'm not going to be able to hold it together. And so something happened. Yeah, so something happened the other day, and like the thought that came into my mind about this person, it was just so rude and so judgmental. I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything, but in my head it was the most so rude, so judgmental, and I was assuming as if I knew. And then I immediately caught myself and I was like, what is that thought? That is no, like we do not do judgment here. We are not assholes. Stop being an asshole, Emily.
So funny. I like catch myself sometimes in that state as well. And I think like the thing about healing is like it's a balance, right? Like it's like we can't be love and light all the time.
Totally.
Because like we're going to get pissed off. Like we're going to have like bad days. We're going to like think people are assholes.
Totally.
And then the trick is just not like letting that derail you from your day or from how you feel about life or yourself or your potential.
And not letting yourself stay there.
Yeah, not letting yourself marinate.
Yeah, but I agree. I think it's important to allow yourself to like feel emotions as you have them. Don't try to be this like perfect person. You know, I feel like whenever I first started to open up about, you know, my faith in general and, you know, personal development and trying to always be the best version of myself, at a certain point, I felt a little pressure, like, oh my God, I have to be perfect now. Or like, I have to, you know, like you feel like you always have to be the positive, happy, grateful. And it's like, that's not reality.
No, it's definitely not. It's so messy. Reality is so messy. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this before, but there are people who say like, we are souls like wrapped in skin having a human experience. And the human experience is really fucking tricky and messy. And the best thing we can do is grow to love ourselves and accept all of us. Mm-hmm. And when we can really get to that place, and it takes time and a lot of work, we actually are released from judgment of anybody else. And it's such a beautiful thing because you can give more love because you have so much like within you.
Wow. So going into this a little bit more, can you dive into self-love and kind of what that journey looks like and like your tips for learning to love yourself? Because a lot of people say they've done no work at all. Mm-hmm. They really don't love themselves. They really don't feel good about themselves. They're acting that out. They're projecting that out. How can they turn the focus inward and truthfully start to just not have judgment for themselves and not live in, you know, guilt and shame? And like, how do they love themselves with their mess, like in the mess?
Yeah. I think it starts really small because it can be really scary. Like the idea of like, for me at least, where I was like, self-love is like so fucking far away from like, I just not want to hurt myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if you can relate, it can seem like such a really distant concept. And I ended up creating a post about this like a while back that my experience is that it's like, there's a self-love spectrum. And it kind of like all the way on the end is like self-annihilation on one end and all the way on the other is self-love. And in between there are a bunch of different steps that you can go by that are a little bit more bite-sized. So you're not just like going to wake up and start loving yourself because that's impossible.
And it seems fake.
And it seems fake, yeah. So I think, you know, what I did was it's like if I were to go like up the ladder, it's like self-annihilation, self-loathing, self-dislike, self-neutrality,
oh wow,
self-acceptance, self-like, and then self-love. So there are like 8 or whatever. I don't know. I didn't count
however
that. But
many.
there's steps, and that we can't get to self-love before we kind of increase like little by little and just first become neutral. You know, I know for me, like I had a lot of body stuff and like body image issues. And it started with like, you know, standing in front of the mirror and just like holding a hand over a part of my body and just saying and thanking it in gratitude for what it does. Thank you for my heart for beating every single day and every night while I'm sleeping, and I don't have to be awake to remind it to beat for me. Like, what an incredible thing that my body does for me. And just like my hands, like I can type, I can write, I can do all these things. I can walk. I'm like thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it starts with that gratitude, and then eventually it grows, and you start to feel that way regularly. But it's the neural rewiring. It's the feeling safe in your body. It's the feeling safe to be happy. See, like joy and happiness is the scariest emotion for someone who's experienced trauma.
Wow.
It's terrifying, unconsciously or consciously, whether you recognize it or not. You will sabotage your way away from happiness because that is terrifying for the unconscious.
Is it because they're scared that if they feel it, it'll be taken away?
And that disappointment will completely annihilate them, the ego and the sense of self and identity, and that will be the end. And it won't be bearable.
How do they start to work towards allowing themselves little happiness and little joy? You know, what does that step look like?
So I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, Rachel Overval, and she's a sexologist and sex coach. And she was talking about like incorporating intentional pleasure practices. And I love this because I never called it this, but that's what I tell my clients to do in the beginning. Like create moments for self-care and pleasure throughout your day. Pleasure, not just meaning sexual pleasure, but meaning like what brings you that embodied feeling of like, for me, it's like donuts, like really good hot donuts, like, oh, or like.
Which we have in the studio.
Which we have, like that's why I'm talking about it. Or like the sunshine on my face. If I've been inside for a long time, just closing my eyes and smelling like I live by the ocean, like the ocean air, and having that moment is juicy and it makes my body feel so good and my mind feels so good, and that's pleasure. So I want you guys like to commit to, and this is something Rachel talks about, 30 minutes of pleasure this week in little bits every day. So if that's 5 minutes of eating something that makes you feel so happy, or talking to someone that makes you feel nourished, or you know, watching a show or reading a book or masturbating or whatever it is that like makes you feel empowered and happy, like 5 minutes a day. Like just give yourself 5 minutes a day of that, and you'll see it'll start to feel a little bit easier and you'll want to do it more.
I love that. And I would add to that, just make sure that you're being present while you're there doing it and expressing gratitude for it. So I think that those are the big things that I picked out of what you said, was that when you were in it, you weren't just like doing it like a to-do list. Like you were like really soaking in every single moment, like the sunshine on your, you know, face or whatever it was for you. And for me, one of those things is definitely like the feeling that I get like right after I finish a workout.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Weightlifting specifically.
Yes.
Like that feeling is incredible.
It's amazing. That's why like I really think that sometimes fitness can be that first step for people for going into all of this. Because sometimes people are not really ready to face their triggers or to face their childhood trauma or to go into these things. But their life is crazy, but they're willing to go and do a little 45-minute workout.
Yeah, and actually there's tons of research that supports the therapeutic benefits of weightlifting specifically as a workout. Just the mind-body connection, the getting back, like I said, into your body, that's so healing. Feeling the power of your body if you've been victimized. For me, it was huge to realize I could like punch something and I could really do stuff with my body. Like that was awesome. So, and then not to mention, of course, like endorphins, happy chemicals, and just it's awesome. It's all good.
I agree with that. I think especially for women that have dealt with different traumatic experiences, something like doing fighting or learning self-defense and these things, you have no idea how much confidence it'll give you and how good and badass it'll make you feel like from the inside out. So I'm a huge supporter of that because I think every woman and man, every person, regardless of what gender you are, I think deserves to feel that confidence within themselves. So we had a few questions about different types of therapy. So, and I don't actually know what this is. Maybe I should have researched it.
No, all good.
It's called EMDR therapy.
Yeah, EMDR.
So what is that, and do you suggest it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I'll just first preface this by saying I'm not specifically EMDR trained, although I do know about it, and it was something that I learned about in school, and I have a couple of colleagues of mine who practice it. So the essential kind of idea behind EMDR is that in our limbic system, in our emotional brain, we have our trauma memories fused with the emotions that we experienced at the time, and that emotional activation gets stuck. And that what EMDR does is through binaural stimulation, which means like stimulating both sides of your brain, it's able to sever kind of and eliminate the emotional trauma from the memory. So you can still remember everything that happened, but instead of having these underlying unconscious triggers, you don't have the triggers anymore. It kind of fast tracks your way to erasing them.
Wow.
So it's really spectacular. It's like brand new. It's part of like this new wave of neuroscience research that we have all these like MRI and technology and things that we haven't had in the past to really just discover the mechanisms behind healing. Mm-hmm. I highly recommend it. If you are someone in a position, it's expensive, so it is kind of like if you have insurance and it's covered and all that good stuff, get in there and get it. Like it is, cool. Instead of talk therapy for 15 years, you can do like a couple of sessions of EMDR and it has a really deep, powerful, lasting effect.
Wow. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. So for somebody that wants to just start this journey of, doing the work and that kind of thing, let's say that they can't go get a therapist. What are some free resources that would be good for them to start diving into?
Yes. Okay. So if you're a trauma survivor, first of all, I'm a huge fan, obviously, of podcasts. Yeah. It is like the best information. Like we are living in the information era. Obviously, we need to be discerning about like what information we're taking in. But generally in the healing space with licensed professionals, clinicians, and established healing professionals, if you tune into their podcasts, they have so many great resources. I love the polyvagal podcast. Mm-hmm. Polyvagal has nothing to do with your vagina. It's actually a nerve that runs and wraps around your gut, goes up your spine, through your brain, and is the information highway for understanding safety and security within your body and in your environment. Wow. So it's basically what gets really fucked up when we have trauma. You're kind of put all on alert for like the rest of your life, on high alert. So this podcast specifically really talks about the science behind trauma and like how it affects your body and brain and like how we can really get started working through it. So if you are specifically working through that, the Polyvagal podcast is amazing. And then there's a bunch of other ones out there that, all have different takes on it. So I recommend just like finding somebody that, listen to a few and find one that really speaks to you. Mm-hmm. Some books that I really love. I have a post on my feed. And if you were to go to my link in bio, it's a search my social. So you can actually put it in the search bar, put books, and it'll pop up.
Oh, cool.
I have 22 books on healing and all of those kinds of things. So there's books like Waking the Tiger, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I love Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a really great, resource for mindfulness and how the brain and meditation can help heal. So again, drop in my DMs if you want any specific, I have so many. And on my new website that's coming out, I will have a page with all free resources that y'all can find. And again, find Instagram therapists and Instagram coaches that are putting information out and sign up for their email lists.
How cool is it that we're in the day and age where you can just find someone on Instagram, join their email list, and get so many resources related to healing and trauma therapy? And that's amazing. I love that. So quick questions as we kind of close out here, just some basic questions. What do you do as far as grounding, or what are some like grounding tips that you have?
Yeah. So if you probably can't see, but right now I'm holding a crystal. And for me, having a grounding object really helps me. Oh. So I have not so much anymore, but it's higher anxiety coming into these situations, or maybe meeting with a client for the first time, or whatever's happening for you. If you're feeling a little activated, a grounding technique I really like is just holding something in your hand and just spending time feeling the temperature, using your senses. Like, what does this feel like? What is the texture? Is it warm? Is it soft? Is it heavy? Is it light? What does it feel like on all the edges? Are there little cracks? Like, what is the color? Okay. And just spending time like really looking at it, or vice versa. I was just really feeling it with my fingers while we were talking as a way to like self-soothe.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. Does it like help you stay present essentially?
I think for me, it keeps me present, and it also, like I said, holding something of the earth is very grounding for our bodies.
cool.
Like we are of the earth. So and another thing that you can do is go out and put your bare feet in grass, or in the sand, or in any kind of like earthy.
do love that.
Oh God, so juicy.
Juicy.
So juicy. Go out for a hike. Get into nature is so grounding for our nervous
that.
systems. Like it's very grounding to be in nature.
Okay.
Or take deep belly breaths. If you've ever seen a baby, that's the other easy thing you can do is spend 5 minutes really focusing on taking your breath from the top of your chest into the bottom of your belly and your lower back, and expanding that. And if you do that for about 5 minutes, you will switch into your rest and digest, nice, relaxed nervous system automatically, because that's like your body just does that.
Wow. Okay. And that was the next question, was someone asked about breath work, and if you have any resources for breath work, whether it be like YouTube channels or videos that you watch, or like how did you kind of get into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I I'm not a breathwork expert by any means. There's so many different, I think, styles out there. What I'll say is there's a couple of things. So that's not, I don't know that deep belly breathing is necessarily considered like breath work. That's more like yogic breathing that I was talking about. So breath work can be very activating. So if you are someone who hasn't processed trauma yet, hasn't really doesn't have a ton of self-awareness, doesn't have a lot of resources or skills or toolbox set up yet to help you through the painful part of this process, do not jump into breath work.
Yeah.
You will have a very activated experience that's almost, along the lines of a psychedelic experience.
Wow.
Yeah, because when we breathe in a certain way, if you're doing, I forget his name, I think it's David Engel or something, the more traditional one where you go and you're like, and there's like a whole thing, and you breathe like that, you're basically hyperventilating yourself and then inducing a psychosis or, psychedelic state within your mind. So it activates things, and my whole body like froze, and then I was like hysterically crying. And so for me, being someone who had been in this, by when I did my first breathwork class, I'd been healing for like almost 4 years. I was like, oh, it's going to be fine. And it wasn't. It was so intense. So just be really wary of the kind of breath work. I would look into yogic breath work, pranayama breathing exercises. If you're just starting out, they're so gentle and they're really loving and supportive. If you're looking to release, process, get into the shadow work, you're stronger, you're ready to like cry and like fucking scream and like get into that, then you want to dive into like more of that I think it's David Engel. I'll figure out the name and I'll give it to you. But that more of that kind of activated breath work. And I think there's Amanda knows this, Amanda Bucci, but she does something on the breath work channel. She doesn't teach, but somebody that she knows does. I think it's called the breath work channel. And I have to check it out, but I've heard really good things about that, and it's online. And then, DM me. I have a couple practitioners that I really like, but it's only if you're really like ready for that.
Yeah, right. Okay. I love it. And I love how, everything that we've been talking about here, there's stages and there's steps to everything. So just kind of recognize where you're at, what you need for right now, what you're ready for, what you're ready to face, what you're not ready to face, and be realistic with yourself in that. Yeah. So it's been so amazing having you on. I feel like we could talk on and on forever. So I would really love if you would just take a moment right now and share kind of what you do, any offerings that you have. Feel free to let them know everything that you offer, your coaching, give them the whole rundown.
Oh my God. Okay. So let me get ready. So basically what I do now is business and leadership coaching. I did mental health coaching and trauma coaching for a while. And then when COVID hit, I stepped into kind of this position of helping my other light workers and healers and psychologists, therapists, and healing professionals really step into the online space, because the world is really in so much pain right now, and we need healers out there doing their thing more than ever. But a lot of healers, unfortunately, do not know how to get their business built online. And I was able to actually grow and scale mine to high 6 figures within a year. So I was like, let me just put this together. So I help light leaders. I like to call them light leaders because they are definitely leaders. Start their practices, grow their leadership skills, do the inner work, but also find their purpose so that they can serve and help humanity kind of get better. Yeah. I have very big dreams and change the world, because I think each one of us has a light to shine. And when we can access that and then get the tools and support around how do we create a conscious business around this, we can change the dynamics of everything.
I think so, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. So that's what I've been doing. And in terms of like working with me, I do one-on-one work here and there. It's something that really is reserved for, it's a 6-month journey. It's a very intense process for those who really feel called to do leadership and then a little bit of business work. But I do have really great programs. I have the Ignite program, and this is running 3 times a year now. We're halfway through the second round.
Oh, congrats.
Thanks. Everybody's doing so awesome. And this is for any women or women identified human beings that want to start their healing business, whether you're a clinician, a coach, a therapist, yogi, a Reiki practitioner, spiritualist, whoever. If you're here to serve humanity and heal and spread your light, then I want you. And I want to show you how you can turn that into a business that will bring you so much abundance, but also allow you the freedom to give back and create so much more to give back to humanity. And that is 100% the mission. How can we make it work for everybody?
Yes. I love that. And I love the fact that you really focus on helping the healer to have all of the abundant resources that they need to do what they're here to do, because they're some of the most valuable people in the world. Like people can't go out and do what they're meant to do in the world if they're still suffering from trauma, if they're not healing from their past, if they're walking around with these open wounds on them per se. So it's like these healers are so needed. And I fully support healers being, super supported in a way that allows them the freedom to focus on what they really want to do. So I love that you're able to help structure the business, help the leader, step into their calling fully in order to do that in a way that, like you said, helps everyone. Yeah. Everyone wins.
In a way that feels ethical, it's aligned, and, we're not like robbing anybody of their money. We're not like being, in our marketing, very like trying to manipulate, make people feel bad or guilty or ashamed of what they're going through. It's like, how do we empower people to step into this process of changing their lives so that they can go out and become the next, person running for office, or they can go out and be the next person who starts a big, big corporation that then changes the world because they're green and they're like healed and they know they want to give back. When we operate from an unhealed place, we hurt other people always. And it's unconscious. So imagine a society where after 10 years of all these healers being out there in the world online, helping as many people as possible, all of these healed, happy, aware people, conscious people then build businesses and economies around healing, around wellness and happiness and wholeness. That's a different world. So
sounds like heaven.
Right? So,
can you imagine walking around with a bunch of people that are all doing the work? You run into each other and both people are they both assume the best in each other and they both take responsibility. And
that's like me and my friends, and it's really dorky. And I'll have friends reach out and say, "Hey, I'm going through so much right now. Do you have the space to hold space for me right now? Are you okay if I dump on you a little bit?" And that's so nice. They know, so nice. They ask, they know they're not emotional dumping on me. They know they're not going to overwhelm. They're like, "Hey, I'm feeling this, but I respect your boundaries." And I'm like, "God damn."
Well, okay. Yeah, I love that so much. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's so valuable when you can find people that are on that same level.
Yeah, so magical. It's so awesome.
It really is. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everyone, please give it a thumbs up, give her a little comment. Feel free to DM her. All of her links will be down below. Check out her Instagram, follow her there, follow her podcast, the Conscious Leadership Podcast. Do all of the things, all of the support. Let her know what you thought about it. And I just want to ask you guys that if you felt like this podcast was valuable in any way, then do me a favor and share it on your Instagram stories, text it to a friend, do all the things, rate and review the podcast. I would really appreciate that. And I will see you guys in the next one.
Thanks, guys.